That feeling you have right now, that something big is coming, that the ground beneath the world is about to shift, that is not paranoia. Carl Jung had a name for what you are sensing. He called it Enantiodromia, and it means one thing. Things are about to flip. Not slowly, not gradually, overnight. You felt it before you clicked this video, and you were right to trust that feeling. While 99% of people are walking forward with their eyes closed, you are already standing at the edge, looking out. Today, we are going to walk through Jung's roadmap for the most sudden psychological shift in modern history. And by the end, you will understand not just what is coming, but why you are one of the few who will not be swept away. Let's start at the beginning. Jung believed that psychological energy never disappears. It does not fade. It does not dissolve. It builds. Think of a dam. On one side, you have the surface of a river, calm and moving slowly. On the other side, the pressure of everything that has been held back for years, decades even. The dam looks solid. Everyone who walks past it says the same thing. It's fine. It's always been fine. But the water keeps rising. That is exactly where society is right now. On the surface, things look normal. People go to work. They scroll their phones. They talk about the weather. But underneath, something enormous is pressing against the walls. Jung called this the shadow of the collective, the hidden pressure that no civilization can hold back forever. He was not speaking in metaphors when he said this. He was describing a psychological law, a law as reliable as gravity. Here is why that matters. Because when a dam breaks, it does not warn you. There is no announcement, no slow trickle that gives you time to move to higher ground. Dams hold, and then they do not. And in the seconds after the break, the people standing closest to the wall are the ones who never imagined it could give way. The ones who pointed to its strength as proof that nothing would ever change. That is not a story about water. That is a story about what is happening in the psychology of this civilization right now. Jung did not just identify the pattern, he documented the warning signs that appear right before the dam breaks. The first sign is extreme polarization, not disagreement, not debate, but the complete inability of two sides to even hear each other. When groups stop speaking to one another and start speaking only at each other, that is not a political problem. According to Jung, it is a psychological symptom. It means the collective shadow has grown so large that it is being projected outward onto opponents, enemies, strangers. Every group sees its own darkness reflected in the other, and the more they deny it, the more intense the projection becomes. The second sign is a widespread loss of meaning. When people stop believing in shared stories, shared values, or a shared future, something dangerous fills that empty space. Jung observed this in pre-war Europe. He saw populations who had stopped believing in the old structures but had not yet found new ones to replace them. That gap, that hollow, space between the death of one meaning and the birth of another, is exactly when the snap becomes most likely. Think about a composite profile based on observed social patterns, a generation who grew up believing that if they worked hard and followed the rules, life would make sense. Then something shifted. The rules stopped working. The path that was supposed to lead somewhere started leading nowhere, and rather than an explanation, the world offered more noise, more distraction, more certainty from people who clearly had no idea what was happening. That vacuum, that collapse of the story a society tells itself, is precisely the condition Jung said could not last. Something always fills it, and what fills it is not always good. The third sign is the rise of mass anxiety. Not the ordinary anxiety of daily life, but a deep, sourceless dread that spreads through populations like a fog. People feel it, but cannot name it. They call it stress. They call it burnout. They call it doom scrolling. But Jung would call it something else entirely. He would call it the unconscious recognizing a pattern that the conscious mind is still refusing to look at. Think about the composite picture of someone you might know. Maybe several people you know. They feel fine most of the time, but late at night, they feel something is off. They cannot explain it. They just know something is coming. That is not anxiety. That is perception. And Jung spent his career arguing that perception of this kind deserves to be taken seriously, not medicated away. And these three signs are not theoretical. They are measurable. Researchers who study collective behavior have documented each of them in civilizations right before their major turning points. In the years leading up to the French Revolution, historians note the same pattern: extreme factional thinking, a hollowing out of shared cultural meaning, and a spreading sourceless anxiety among the general population. People knew something was wrong. They just did not have the language to describe it, not unlike the language many people are using today. Something is off. I just feel like things can't keep going like this. I don't know. It just feels wrong. Jung would say, pay attention to that feeling. That is not weakness. That is the psyche doing exactly what it was designed to do. Pattern recognition operating at the level of the unconscious before the conscious mind has caught up. Now let's talk about what actually happens when the dam breaks. Jung called it Enantiodromia. The word comes from ancient Greek, and it means the tendency of things to transform into their opposites. He borrowed the concept from the philosopher Heraclitus, who noticed thousands of years ago that extreme conditions always flip, that what goes too far in one direction always eventually reverses. Empaths aren't broken, they're alchemists in progress. The alchemist's path gives you drills, Jung-based boundaries, and 3 exclusive chapter videos to turn overwhelm into clarity. By Surreal Mind, 236-page downloadable ebook, in stock. Begin now at thesurrealmind.com. Jung applied this to both individuals and to entire societies. An era of extreme order becomes an era of chaos. A culture of repressed emotion erupts into collective hysteria. A civilization built on control and certainty suddenly loses both in the space of a single generation. And here is the part that most people do not understand. When Enantiodromia happens, it does not happen slowly. That is the entire point. It happens in a moment. Psychologically speaking, the reversal is almost instantaneous. One day, the dam holds. The next day, it does not. And the world on the other side of that moment looks nothing like the world before it. Consider how quickly the cultural landscape of the 1960s reversed from the rigid conformity of the 1950s. Consider how rapidly the political and social certainties of the late 1980s dissolved in Eastern Europe. These were not slow changes. They felt slow from the inside, building pressure quietly for years. But the actual flip, the visible rupture, happened in a span of months, sometimes weeks. We also see this dynamic clearly in the social history of the early 20th century. A society that had been intensely ordered found itself, within a decade, completely unrecognizable to itself. The rules changed, the values shifted, and the people who had quietly carried doubts, the ones who always sensed the fragility beneath the confidence, were suddenly not the odd ones out anymore. They were the ones who understood what had happened. This is exactly the pattern Jung was mapping. Not a warning of apocalypse, a description of a cycle. And cycles, by definition, complete themselves regardless of whether anyone believes in them. Jung was not predicting doom when he wrote about this. He was drawing a map. And maps are only useful to people who know how to read them. The type of person who seeks out conversations about the unconscious and collective psychology is almost never the person who was completely comfortable in the world as it was. You were likely always a bit of an outsider, not dramatically, but in the quieter way of someone who noticed things others missed. Jung had a term for this specific type of awareness. He called it differentiated intuition, the ability to perceive what is happening in the unconscious layer of a situation before it has risen to the surface. And while this quality can feel like a burden in a culture that rewards confidence and certainty, it is precisely this quality that becomes most valuable at the moment of the collective flip. If you have ever felt out of place in a world that seemed too loud, too shallow, too certain of itself, that feeling was not a flaw. It was information. Jung spent decades studying a specific type of person. He called them introverted intuitives, people whose inner world is more vivid and more reliable than the noise outside, people who sense the emotional undercurrent of a room before anyone has said a word. In ordinary times, the person who feels too much is told to feel less. Society has always had a complicated relationship with its most perceptive members. It needs them, but cannot quite admit it. Jung saw this in his clinical work and in history. The individuals most out of step with their era were often the ones whose observations, dismissed as anxiety or oversensitivity, turned out to be the most accurate reading of what was actually happening. Their discomfort was not a disorder. It was a warning system working exactly as it should. In ordinary times, this quality is isolating. People like you are called too sensitive, overthinking, too intense. You were probably told at some point to relax, to stop reading into things, to just go along with everyone else. But we are not in ordinary times. Jung believed that the most dangerous period in any collective shift is not the shift itself. It is the moment right after, when the old rules stop working and the new ones have not been established yet. That is the moment of maximum chaos. And it is the moment when the people who have been quietly doing their inner work, the people who have already sat with their own darkness and made peace with it, those are the people who become anchors. While the crowd panics, the person who has faced their own shadow does not. Not because they are fearless, but because they have already been through their own private version of the collapse. They have already sat in the dark, questioned everything, and rebuilt from the inside out. The external chaos does not destroy them, because they have already survived an internal version of it. This is what Jung called shadow work, and it is not a luxury. Right now, it is a form of preparation. Shadow work does not mean digging endlessly into pain. It means becoming honest with yourself about the parts of you that you would rather not look at, your capacity for anger, your hunger for approval, the ways you have hurt people without meaning to, the fears you have been avoiding. When you face those things consciously, they lose their power to drive your behavior unconsciously. You stop projecting, you stop reacting, you start responding. And a person who responds rather than reacts is exactly the kind of person that a world in crisis needs. Jung would have used different language. He called this withdrawing your projections, recognizing the shadow you see in others as something that first lives in yourself. There is a narrative illustration that captures this precisely, drawn from the pattern Jung observed across his clinical cases. A person who had spent years absorbing everyone else's emotional reality, carrying collective tension without realizing it, not because they were weak, because they were sensitive. Their nervous system picked up what others filtered out, and for most of their life, that cost them. They felt everything. The friction in a room before anyone spoke, the gap between what someone said and what they meant, the slow accumulation of pressure in a relationship long before the breaking point. But then something shifted, not an event, a choice. They stopped treating their sensitivity as a malfunction. They started treating it as data. They began to ask themselves, each time they felt overwhelmed, is this mine? Or is this something I have absorbed from my environment? That single question, practiced consistently, began to change everything. They did not stop feeling. They started understanding what they were feeling and why. And slowly, That sensitivity became something else entirely. It became discernment. It became stability. It became, in Jung's framework, the foundation of individuation. Think about what Jung called the individuated person. The actual goal of Jungian therapy was not a perfect person or an enlightened one, but a complete one, someone who has done the work. By the time the external world began showing signs of serious instability, this person was already calm, not because they did not see what was happening, but because they had already made their peace with uncertainty. Jung described this psychological state as individuation. It is the process of becoming fully yourself, not the version of yourself that other people need, not the version that society rewards, but the real, complete, complicated, conscious version. And it is exactly this person, the individuated person, who does not get swept away in the chaos of Enantiodromia. Because while everyone else is searching for certainty, the individuated person is comfortable not having it. While everyone else is looking for someone to tell them what to think, the individuated person already knows how to think. While everyone else is waiting for the world to go back to normal, the individuated person understands that normal was already the problem. Now let us talk about what this means practically, because understanding enantiodromia without a plan is just anxiety with better vocabulary. When the collective shift comes, and based on every historical and psychological pattern Jung identified, it is not a question of if, it is a question of when. Your job is not to fight it. Your job is not to fix it. Your job is to be an anchor. That means one thing above all else: do not lose yourself in the panic. Collective panic spreads the same way any emotion spreads, through contagion. When everyone around you is flooding with fear, the easiest thing in the world is to absorb that fear as your own. Jung called this participation mystique, the blurring of the line between your psychological reality and the emotional atmosphere of the crowd. The way you protect yourself from that is the same way you build any protection. In advance, through practice, through the daily habit of checking in with yourself, distinguishing your own feelings from the feelings you have absorbed from your environment, and returning to your own center. This is not mystical. It is psychological hygiene, and it is a skill you can build starting today. Here is a practical way to think about it. Every morning, before you check your phone, before you open the news, before you let the outside world in, take 3 minutes and ask yourself one question. What is actually mine right now? What do I actually feel beneath all the noise? That 3-minute practice, done consistently, builds a kind of inner compass, so that when the external world is spinning, your internal world has a fixed point. There is a second practice, just as simple, rooted in what Jung described as withdrawing projections. Once a day, pick one strong reaction you had, an irritation, a flash of anger, a judgment about someone that came fast and felt certain. Then ask, what does this reaction tell me about myself? Not about the other person. About me. What part of my own experience is this touching? What am I refusing to look at? This is not self-blame. It is self-study, and it is one of the most powerful things a person can do in a time of collective instability. Because the less unexamined material you are carrying, the less likely you are to project it onto the world around you. The less likely you are to become part of the panic, rather than the anchor against it. Jung did not believe that people with this kind of inner stability were rare by nature. He believed they were rare by choice. Most people never do the work because they are never forced to. But you are here, which means something in you already understands that the time for that work is not later. It is now. Think about what it means to be a watcher on the wall. In ancient cities, those people were not the strongest or the most powerful, but they were the most awake. They could see what was coming before anyone else could. And that awareness, that refusal to look away, was worth more than any weapon when the moment of crisis arrived. That is what you are being asked to be right now. Not a warrior, not a savior, just awake, just conscious, just honest about what you see. Jung spent his entire career making the case that consciousness is the most important force in human history. Not armies, not governments, not economies. Consciousness, individual people, awake to themselves, refusing to be swept along by collective forces they do not understand. Every time, a civilization has survived its own shadow. It survived because enough individuals chose to face the darkness rather than pretend it was not there. Not a majority, never a majority. Just enough people who were paying attention. You are reading the signs. You sensed the shift before you understood it. You have been sitting with questions that most people refuse to ask. That is not a coincidence. The moment of Enantiodromia, the flip, is not the end of the world. Let me be very clear about that. It is not destruction. It is transformation. The danger is only for those who have refused to grow. For the person who has done the inner work, the sudden reversal is not a catastrophe. It is a beginning. The chaos clears the old structures that were no longer serving anyone. The pressure that breaks the dam also cleans the river. What comes after the flip, if you are grounded and conscious and awake, is a world with more space for authenticity than the one before it. More space for the kind of depth and sensitivity that was never rewarded in the culture that is now ending. The only way through the shift is individuation. Become the most honest, most conscious, most fully realized version of yourself that you can. Stop trying to fit into a world that is already in the process of changing. Stop performing the identity that the old culture rewarded and start building the identity that the next era is going to need. That is your roadmap. That is what Jung left us. He did not leave us a prediction of disaster. He left us a map of the pattern and a method for staying whole while the pattern plays out. The dam is full. The pressure is real. Enantiodromia is coming, the flip Jung described, the reversal of all accumulated force. But you already knew that. That is why you are here. And the fact that you are here, that you are watching this, that you are asking these questions, means you are already doing what Jung asked of us. You are already awake. Now stay that way. This is not a message built on fear. Fear is what happens when you see a pattern and feel powerless in the face of it. This is a message built on awareness, and awareness is the opposite of powerless. Every person who has ever navigated a period of massive collective change successfully, whether in their personal life or in the broader story of civilization, did so not because they were the strongest or the loudest or the most certain. They did so because they refused to stop paying attention. They held their center when the world lost its own. They remained honest about what they saw, even when the crowd insisted otherwise. That is all you are being asked to do. Hold your center, stay honest, stay awake. The watchers on the wall are the ones who make it through. And right now, that is exactly what the world needs more of. In The Alchemist's Path, perception training for empaths, you'll turn overwhelm into wisdom with practical drills, Jung-inspired boundaries, and step-by-step perception training. This guide includes 3 exclusive chapter videos to deepen each lesson. Written by Surreal Mind, 236 pages, beautifully designed 8.5 by 11 downloadable ebook, in stock now. Start your training today. Feel deeply while thinking clearly. Get The Alchemist's Path at thesurrealmind.com.